Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, it was a big week for David Cameron's renegotiation of Britain's membership of the EU. He once promised a fundamental change in that relationship as a condition for backing the campaign to stay in. Well, there are changes, but perhaps not quite as fundamental as many of his supporters wanted. And what he has achieved still needs to be agreed by EU leaders at a summit in a fortnight's time, where it could be further watered down. But Mr. Cameron says what he's achieved is so significant that if Britain was not an EU member, this would make him want to join. Here he is speaking earlier in the week.
I can say, hand on heart, I've delivered the commitments that I've made in my manifesto, and I think the whole country knows that if you, for instance, pay people £5,000–10,000 additional to their wages, then that is a draw to Britain. And that's one of the reasons why we've seen such high levels of migration and movement.
So, David Cameron says it lives up to everything that was promised in the Conservative election manifesto. To discuss whether that's true, I'm joined by the former Cabinet Minister, Eric Pickles. Welcome back to the Sunday Politics. Now, you said this week the Prime Minister has kept to the letter and the spirit of his manifesto promises. So let's look at what the letter promised.
Page 72.
Your manifesto said, quote, "We will insist that EU migrants who want to claim tax credits and child benefit must live here and contribute to our country for a minimum of 4 years." Now, his emergency brake on tax credits doesn't achieve that, does it?
It goes somewhere towards that. Plus, you've got to bear in mind the things we've been able to do through domestic law. Now, if you're a job seeker from Europe and you don't find a job within 6 months, you're obliged to leave. And that's been achieved through domestic law.
But the manifesto, just to be clear, the manifesto promised no in-work benefits, welfare benefits, until you've been here for 4 years. What the reality is now is graduated, they rise, and after 4 years, you get the full benefits.
Well, it's not unreasonable.
So what you promised.
It's not unreasonable after 4 years to get full benefit. But what we do know is that the criteria for putting on a break for 4 years has already been passed. The largest political party in the European Union agrees that's happened, and we should have this in place after the referendum in a matter of months.
Well, it hasn't yet been passed because it will have to be approved by the European Parliament and by the other 27 members. And what constitutes an emergency? The cost of in-work benefits to migrants is £500 million a year. We're a 1.65 trillion economy. Public spending is 750 billion. Why is £500 million an emergency? It's only 1.6% of the tax credit bill.
Well, perhaps you didn't hear my earlier answer, which is we already know the political leader of the largest political party in the Parliament of Europe has said that that we've already arrived at those conditions, and that that an emergency break will be placed in a matter of months.
But what sense is it an emergency?
Well, it's certainly an emergency in the views of our European partners. They've agreed to this break. But of course, the precise details in terms of how the mechanism will operate in future for other countries will be decided over the next 2 weeks. But what we do know, so far as the United Kingdom is concerned, is we will get the break.
Your manifesto went on to say, if an EU migrant's child is living abroad, they should receive no child benefit or child tax credit, no matter how long they've worked in the UK, no matter how much tax they have paid. There it is up on the screen. No child benefit. The settlement doesn't deliver on that either.
What it does deliver is a harmonisation of benefits, so that the level of benefits will be exactly the same as it would be as if they were in their own host country.
Well, that doesn't harmonise benefits. You're actually going to have 28 different levels of child benefit.
In many cases, it can be as much as a quarter, as late as a quarter of the benefit that we pay.
And in some cases, it could be more.
Yes, indeed, not many people do pay the same level that we do. But the point I was making, Mr. Neil, was that in Poland, it's a quarter of the level it is here.
But you promised no child benefit for migrants. What you're delivering is index-linked child benefit for migrants. It's not the same thing.
It's a big improvement of the current situation.
But it's not what
But
you
it's not
promised.
unreasonable that when you go into negotiations, you do precisely that. And I firmly believe that it is within the spirit of what we said.
Your manifesto also said that you will, quote, control migration from the European Union by reforming welfare rules. Indeed, Mr. Cameron at one stage said that reducing immigration from the EU would be at the heart of his renegotiation. Can you give us an idea of how much these changes in the settlement, such as they are, will reduce EU migration?
Well, I'm not part of the negotiating team, so all I can go on is what I've seen in newspapers. But given that we know that in work benefits, 40% of new arrivals are supported by that, given that the average is £6,000 additional and can be as much as you said, £10,000 additional, then it's going to have an effect on equalising.
Well, you say 40%, but actually that's not the figure. We know from a Freedom of Information release from HMRC that if there had been a break in the past 4 years, it would have affected 84,000 people, 84,000 families. That's it. It's not 40%.
What I said was that 40% of new immigrants that come in, new migrants that come in, claiming worse benefits. I mean, you are doing apples and pears there.
Well, I'm not actually. It's 84,000 families, which is nowhere near 40%. But last year, 180,000 net migration was 180,000 from the EU. Do you have any idea by how much that figure will be reduced, if at all, as a result of the settlement?
What we need to be clear is we're not trying to prevent people moving inside the European Union. What we're trying to do are two things. One, to stop people coming for something for nothing and to claim for our benefit system. And the second thing is that we're trying to ensure that there is an equalisation inside the market of people coming out just because of our in-work benefits.
But since this will apply only to new migrants, none of this will apply to those already here, isn't there now likely to be a rush to come in before these new restrictions come in? Isn't that perfectly possible, and that the figure could actually rise?
And clearly, as part of the negotiations, we have to ensure that doesn't happen.
Well, how could you stop it?
Well, it has to be part of the negotiations
But
that
it's
are
not,
currently
it
taking
only applies
place.
to new migrants.
But we've got to kind of ensure that there isn't a new influx.
In your manifesto, if I can return to that, you also said, quote, we want national parliaments to be able to work together to block unwanted European legislation. Now, in the Lisbon Treaty of 2009, there is an orange card system that does that. We've now got Mr. Cameron's red card. In what way is it an improvement?
Well, the orange card's been used twice. And
no, that was the yellow card. The orange card's never been used.
Well, I beg your pardon. I just thought you...
I appreciate it. It's confusing.
It is confusing.
But
how many different cards are there?
There are three. There's a yellow one, there's an orange one from the Lisbon Treaty, and there'll now be this red card. And what I'm trying to work out is, in what way would this red card be any of an improvement on the existing orange card, which means 51% of national parliaments can make the Commission rethink?
Well, first thing is we'll be able to move much quicker in terms of trying to knock out a deal between European parliaments than previously before. Secondly, I think national parliaments, not just ours, are becoming much more assertive in terms of their position. And I think it's a massively important step in the re-establishment of national parliaments, not just ours, but others.
I understand that, but it's not just our parliament. We would need to get 56% of national parliaments, at least 15 other parliaments, and in many cases we'd be asking them, and we'd only have 12 weeks to do it, and in many ways we'd be asking them to vote against the policy of their national governments. That's just not credible, is it?
I think it is reasonable. Of course it's credible. I think it's a very important step on the way of ensuring that national parliaments are much more assertive, and we can ensure. And don't forget, you've got to read this in line of stopping the move towards ever closer union, of protecting sterling.
But, well, let's look at the opt-out on ever closer union. It was meant to be one of the Prime Minister's big wins. If you look at Donald Tusk, the President of the Council, with whom Mr Cameron's been negotiating, he says we've always had that it needn't mean political integration for Britain, that the settlement only confirms what's the status quo. It's not a difference.
Well, it's very interesting for him to say that, but on every programme that I've ever been on that's talked about the European Union, it's been this drift towards ever closer union, political union, that's been important. If it means that we've now re-established that it's about give and take and cooperation, then that's a great thing.
Given how little the Prime Minister has achieved, many of your colleagues,
which I don't accept.
I understand that, but many of your colleagues do. Would his position not be undermined if this, or become untenable, if this draft settlement was further undermined before being finally agreed?
I'm very confident, given that this Prime Minister is the only Prime Minister ever to take powers back from Europe, that he'll be successful.
But could you stomach a further watering down?
It will depend what the overall position is. But my position comes not from any enthusiasm for Europe. It's just a lack of any decent idea that we would be better off outside.
What guarantees, to come back to this business of the European Parliament, there are a number of areas in which the European Parliament has to approve this settlement, including the in-work benefits, including the child benefit element, perhaps even the red card. What guarantees can you give? Because the European Parliament won't do this, if it does it at all, until after the referendum. So how can you guarantee that we'll vote to stay in and the European Parliament will not pass the legislation?
We've already had indications from the European Parliament that they will do precisely that. What I would hope...
Where
just a second, just on. Well, the leader of the largest party has said that.
But they don't have an overall majority.
But just hold on. I think what we would want to see over the next couple of weeks are more clarification in terms of how this would come to operate, not just for us, but for other parties.
But if the European Parliament doesn't pass this, it is not legally binding. The Prime Minister has told us that it can only be legally binding under the existing treaties with legislation through the European Parliament. You're asking the British people to vote blind, to vote yes, without really knowing what the European Parliament might do down the road, in the autumn, at the end of the year.
I'm very confident that will be the case. It will be an appalling misuse of trust that would fundamentally undermine the European Union were they not to do so. But sooner or later we're going to have to go on to discuss what would the consequences been of us leaving, because that would not be a pain-free experience. And I really want guarantees for those that want us to leave, to say that my constituents and my constituents' children will be materially better off by leaving. Not just the same, but better off by leaving.
All right, Eric Pickles, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.